Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into this um, episode of Our Ladies Who Lunch. You can see by my tablescape, I'm very proud of this one because it wasn't inspired by a holiday or, special event like Halloween or Thanksgiving or something, but I really just wanted a fantasy to bring the garden in on a tablescape. So you can read more about it on my new Instagram, which is Garden Glamour by Duchess Designs, which is also my blog. But I got hacked a couple of months ago on Instagram, and we'll leave that for another time. But I'll put the new link up there, and it'll also be on the blog. But as you know, everything for me is all about plants. I mean, here's my Garden to Glass book. For those who don't know me, I'm an author and writer and a garden designer. So here we have lots of fragrant plants, the spicy stock, the carnations and roses, and the lavender that my yoga friend Louie allowed me to cut from her very abundant lavender plant that she has down at her beach house. So I'm just enchanted by all things having to do with fragrant plants and with fragrance itself, perfume, the background to it, the glamorous, fragrance bottles and the stoppers. They've got lots of jewels and things. So for me, I also wanted to be able to have the opportunity to interview a accomplished and world-class perfumer. And we're just so honored to have Mackenzie Riley with us. And she works at IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances, which was a client of my father's. He was an engineer, and so there's yeah. So Mackenzie's going to come on with us shortly. So I'll just read a little bit about her. She's not only a perfumer, but she's a perfume artist as well. And that's where I was first introduced to her. There's an art gallery in Soho that was going to be featuring her. And let's see if we can get this on. So hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me, Mackenzie?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. I was just reading your bio a little bit here that you were born and raised in New York and you have your undergraduate degree in international studies in Paris and Rome, where you studied the history of perfumery and spice trade before training to become a perfumer at IFF's Perfumery School. I was explaining what that was all about. So maybe you can tell us first, what influenced you to become a perfumer? Did you grow up with a garden? How did you come about to know that you wanted to be a perfumer? I'd say.
Yes, so I grew up about an hour north of New York City in a town called Bedford, with many gardens around me. And both of my parents love to garden and cook as well. So I grew up around flowers and spices and all types of cuisine. And I was always inspired by scent and fragrance and flavor from a very young age. But I didn't really know much about the career of a perfumer until I was about 17 because it's not something that's really well known in the US. It's much more known about in Europe and particularly in.
Yeah. So for some people, they create their fragrances at home, or they use essential oils, or that kind of thing. So what inspired you to say, I prefer to work for a company or a corporation rather than just creating the Mackenzie fragrance or making something yourself that way?
Um, I think being self-taught is definitely one path to take, but for me, I was really attracted to working for a big fragrance house because um, the art of perfumery is really a very heritage-based craft, and it's a very opaque industry that the knowledge is really passed down from artisan to artisan over many generations. And it's not really knowledge that you can find in books or on the internet. So it's often very confidential, it's very privatized, it's really difficult to get access to this information. And the only places you can really find it are through being trained by these master perfumers inside of a fragrance house. So what I wanted was to really become an excellent perfumer, and the only way in my mind to do that was to work for one of the big houses, of which there's only a handful in the world. So I came to IFF about 12 years ago, and I was lucky enough to work under the master perfumer Carlos Benaim, who served as my mentor. And the knowledge that I got through him is just really priceless and something that you can't get anywhere else. And that's very precious information that has really shaped me as a young perfumer. And hopefully one day I'll be able to pass that knowledge down to someone else.
Wow. So what was it like studying there? And, was it intense, as an apprenticeship? Maybe what's a typical day like now?
So studying there, I was trained in-house. The process took several years. You start in a school in New York. There were six of us. It was a very competitive application process. You had to work for the company for a couple of years before you could even take the test to be considered. Um, there ended up being six of us in my class. We were all from different countries around the world: Mexico, India, Argentina, Scotland, the UK. Um, and we all did our apprenticeships in different countries: Brazil, France, Singapore, the Netherlands. I myself first went to Singapore, then the Netherlands, and then I worked in the south of France after that to study natural ingredients. And yes, it was very, very rigorous. We move around because it's a very international, global industry, and we need to study the tastes and the markets of different regions and learn different applications. Because when we start our training, we don't know if we're going to be a perfumer doing perfume, or if we're going to be creating shampoo or bar soap or
I see.
um, laundry care. Now, in the end, I'm a fine fragrance perfumer, so I create perfume and sometimes candles, um, more like on the luxury side. But we don't know at first, so we do our cross category training in different countries, and we're exposed to different perfumers who mentor us in these different countries. And then we end up getting a placement, and I was placed back in New York to do fine fragrance. And as for a typical day, uh, probably not a typical day. Every day is different, but the way that we work is we will get a fragrance brief from a client, which can look very different depending on the client. Sometimes it's very visual, like mood boards with photos and images. Sometimes it's a lot of text with data and demographic information. Often other fragrances are referenced as benchmarks. What else? I've even had fragrance briefs that have been like a music video or a song or based on food. And then we have a little bit of time, sometimes a week, sometimes several weeks, to create an initial idea. And once we submit initial ideas to the customer, they come back to us with feedback. If they choose to keep our fragrance, we begin modifications, which are trials, where based on their feedback, we modify our fragrance and we submit what we call mods. So we send them small samples of 2 to 5, um, adjusting the fragrance to their feedback. And we continue to develop like that, sometimes just developing a fragrance for 2 months, and sometimes for 5 years, depending.
4 or 5 years is a long, long time for a fragrance.
Yes, it is. But there are some clients who develop for many, many years. So
I
yes.
when I worked at Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and we would take the VIPs or the press around, and when we got to the lilac collection, you could smell it before you could see it, and so we often told them that smell is one of the senses that recalls memories the most. How do you figure that into your creations, and is that really true?
It's absolutely true. Our sense of smell is the most closely associated with memory and emotion, because when we smell things, um, our olfactive sense doesn't go through our prefrontal cortex, which is the sort of cognitive part of our brain, the thinking part. It goes directly to the part of our brain that processes memory and emotions.
Oh,
Where
wow.
other senses like sight, hearing, touch, those first go through the prefrontal cortex, so you cognitively process them before, and then they go to the emotional part of the brain.
I see that.
So scent is very emotional and very memory oriented. So we definitely incorporate this a lot into our fragrance creations. And at IFF, we have a technology called Scent Emotions, which is a huge database, and we use a lot of scientific technologies like MRIs, fMRI analysis to study which fragrance chemicals and natural ingredients are triggering different emotional reactions in the human brain. And we're able to incorporate this knowledge and create fragrances that elicit certain reactions like happiness. And a famous example of that is the fragrance Clinique Happy, which was created by IFF, and it was designed to actually make you feel happy when you smell the fragrance. We do use that technology quite a bit. And then another thing we do is, in terms of memory, is a lot of the time we will use regressive memories to create a sensation of comfort. So, in a fragrance, we might use, vanillic notes or notes of Nutella or warm milk or these kind of creamy, cocooning comfort to give people that sense of warmth and joy from their childhood. And that's a very, very commonly done thing. And sometimes it's combined with more modern, more aggressive notes on the top. So it's not an overall comforting fragrance, but when you smell it, it smells modern. But at the same time, there's something in the back that's giving you that familiar feeling that feels really good.
Because it's very layered, right? Like, so it can affect you at different stages of the how how you wear it. Like,
Yeah.
it's very nuanced. Yeah. What are the bottles in front of you that you have there? That are they some
So
of the fragrances that you designed?
yes, these are some of the fragrances I've created over the past couple of years. I have two fragrances from Amouage, which is a brand based out of Oman in the Middle East, called Meander and Ashore. I have a fragrance from Sana Jardin, which is a brand based out of London called Incense Water, which is a beautiful rose. I have a fragrance from Zoologist, which is a lovely brand from Canada. And I have a new launch from Giorgio My Way Floral.
That's beautiful. And do you get involved? I mean, I look at fragrances. It's a luxury. As I was saying, this even this tablescape is an homage to you and to your profession, because the perfume bottles are, just so gorgeous, and it's like jewelry. I was saying to you before that when I worked at Bergdorf's, we had this Elsa Peretti with Halston fragrance in it that that you can wear. So there's just so many ways that you can manifest the luxury of fragrances. But how, I mean, people give it as gifts and so on. Some people have a signature fragrance. Some people wear it every day. But when you were talking about the history of fragrances, can you describe that a little bit? How you come about the creation?
Sure. In terms of the history of fragrance, so my background is a little bit different than my colleagues. I don't have a background in chemistry, which is typical. I have a background in anthropology. And so I really studied the history of fragrance from an anthropological angle. And the first perfumers in history were actually priests and doctors, which is a fact that I really love. And the first applications of perfume were spiritual and medicinal. So this is something that I think about a lot when I create, and I try and incorporate a little bit of this into my fragrance creations. And I like the fact that there's something a bit more to a perfume than just a beauty application, and that it can hold sacred and spiritual and have this deeper connection to nature and to the earth, and to the ethereal. And yeah, when I create a fragrance and begin the process, it's different every time. It depends on the client. I always dive deep into the brand and what they stand for and what they're looking for. It's different if it's a niche brand where I have a lot of creative freedom versus if it's a more commercial brief that requires a stricter kind of prototyping. But I always feel that I need a very strong vision in my mind to guide me forward. And once I have that vision to direct me, I sort of move from there, and I keep my eyes on that line and create. And I listen, to the feedback of the client and the feedback of my team, because I work with a team of wonderful scent design managers.
Yes.
And I think at a certain point, my vision guides the fragrance forward. And then I'd say about halfway through, I sort of start listening to the fragrance itself, because it sort of gets its shape and then kind of tells you what to do to it.
I see. I see. I mean, for me, it's all about the plants, but you incorporate, seeds and things from the sea and so on. And you were even telling me that cocktails influence you. So how does that work? And what's your favorite cocktail?
Yeah, I'm inspired by all sorts of things. Cocktails and food are absolutely a big part of that. I think that there's a lot of innovation in the world of mixology, and I'm definitely inspired by some of the great bars that I get to visit, whether I'm traveling or just in New York City. One of my favorite drinks is I love a good passion fruit margarita with mezcal. I love mezcal. It's much smokier than tequila, and I love smoky flavors. My favorite smells are the smoky ones. I love the smell of burning wood. I love a good smoky vetiver or guaiac wood. Even in my food, I love like a smoked sea salt or anything cooked on a wood fire. I love this kind of palette. So a good mezcal with a passion fruit and like rimmed in a chili salt is my favorite drink. And I've actually created a fragrance around this thing. The ingredients like oak moss, guaiac, sort of smoky spice notes, smoky vanilla, mixed with a passion fruit accord and a sort of spicy top notes to do the chili effect.
Wow.
It's a really fun way to kind of incorporate the craft into my daily life and my lifestyle and just find inspiration,
I should say, especially in New York, there's so much to draw from. But if I mean, I just love that you do that, and great minds think alike, I guess, because I love everything smoky too. But can you name the fragrance that you just described, or is that confidential? Or
It's still a work in progress, actually.
oh, okay. But you were also telling me about these books that I don't know if they help inspire you or if they are when it's finished. But IFF has these books that you said, so that's interesting.
Yeah, we have these books. I have them here that we produce. This is an iris book, and we have this is Narcissus. I don't know if you can see them.
Oh yeah, we could see them good.
We have the Rose, and these are produced. So IFF we own a subsidiary company called LMR, or Laboratoire Monique Rémy, which is a naturals company that's based in Grasse in the south of France, which is where I spent my time when I was working there.
Well, well.
Um, and we partner with farms all over the world and do vertical integration platforms where we produce our own natural ingredients that are of the highest quality, absolutely sustainable, ethical, often upcycled, and we are doing environmentally sustainable practices, and we are giving back to the communities and the farmers and doing everything we can to do right by the environment and the communities that we are working with, which is really important to me, because, and to all of us, I think, but because we are so inspired by nature and so enamored with nature and so in love with it that we feel this need to respect it and to protect it so that we have it going forward in the future. So it is something that I'm really proud of. And these books we make, they're just these beautiful books with photography of the flowers and the extraction processes and the harvest and the people harvesting them. And it shows a little bit about the explanation of how the extractions work, whether it's with steam or solvent, and really just like how it's done, which is something most people don't really know much about.
No, they don't. Are those books available just for you internally or for anybody?
These are just available. They're sort of internal, and we provide them to customers.
They're absolutely beautiful. And I love how you say you take care of the environment, because so many times different industries, they just take, but they don't have that sense of community. Does IFF or you have a favorite cause or charity or things that you work for or with?
Well, IFF's motto is "Do More Good," and we are really focused on doing good for the environment and the planet, and the people on it. So in every initiative we're doing, we are trying to do good, whether that's with our naturals or whether that's with green chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
um, and reducing carbon emissions and all that good stuff. For me personally, I'm a big animal lover. I adore animals. I am a dog owner, and I stopped eating meat 20 years ago. And so, some charities that I really love are Farm Sanctuary, which rehomes farm animals and really fights to improve conditions for farm animals. It's a really wonderful charity, and also the Humane Society, ASPCA. I support a lot of charities that work with animals because it's really, really important.
Oh, excellent. Good for you and for IFF. You know, I think true leaders like that really showcase for us what we can do. And it gives us a sense of hope that, we can really take care of planet in our own little way. Like just take little baby steps, that we can all do. And it makes a difference. So we're gonna start to wrap up here, but I'll ask just a couple more questions. One is, we talk about fragrance and perfume, and it's so artful and has this, such a history and so on. But how does it become an art form? I was saying that I was introduced to you, not, in real life, but that there's this olfactory gallery in New York. But you said you've shown at Gauguin and in the Netherlands. So how does fragrance become a piece of art?
Um, so when fragrance is designed, it becomes a piece of art. I think as soon as it's created by a human, it becomes art. Just as a landscape is created by nature, but if it's recreated by with a paintbrush, art. And the scent of a flower, when created by nature, is nature, and when it's recreated by a human, it's art. And I consider myself an artist, somewhere between an artist and an artisan. And yes, so some of our work, a lot of our work is on the commercial end, so it's maybe more design than art, to be technical. But a lot of the time, especially with the niche brands where we have a lot of creative license, it ends up more on the spectrum of art. And I've been lucky enough to work with some galleries and museums and have my fragrance art or olfactive art shown there. So you were referring to the piece I had at Olfactory Art Keller in New York City, which was done for charity last year during COVID. And we were approached by Andreas from the gallery, who wanted to partner with IFF and asked a handful of us perfumers to create a fragrance. We had no limits. We could do, anything we want. And I created a fragrance called Tuberose Tiger that was this really animalic, carnal tuberose. And the image was a tiger with a crown of tuberose flowers around her head. And the fragrances were auctioned off and the money given to charity. They were one of a kind fragrances.
I see. I can't wait to get there and see it. Congratulations. That's a great concept. You're so inspiring. I mean, obviously you're beautiful and the fragrances that you create. I just love the story behind them. I think that means, so very much. But two things. One, what do you see as the future of fragrances, and especially as it relates to, you know, nature and climate preservation and sustainability? And then what advice would you give to someone if they wanted to become a you?
I think the future of fragrance is definitely heading towards more clean, sustainable, ethical practices. We are seeing that coming from both directions in the sense that we're seeing the demand from the consumer. We are definitely seeing, particularly with the Gen Z, people want more transparency about what's in the products they're putting in their body, in and on their bodies. They want to know, where these ingredients are coming from. There's more allergens. There's more interest in naturals and chemicals and what that means. And our industry has a lot of work to do on educating people on that because there's also a lot of misinformation because natural doesn't mean good and chemical doesn't mean bad, and that's really important that we keep communicating that. In many ways, a synthetically created molecule can be much better and safer for the environment than naturals, but it's a case by case thing. So we need to keep communicating that as an industry and educating people, because you do get a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about, who have a voice, who just spread bad information. But we're definitely heading towards a much more clean, sustainable, ethical space, and we're also getting that same pressure and demand from our clients, including our really big multi-billion-dollar umbrella company clients, who are giving us briefs where they're asking for ingredients that are having less impact on the environment, that have high levels of biodegradability, that are safer, that are cleaner, that are less impactful in a negative way. So this is really important, and everything we can to move in that direction as quickly as possible. And I think we are one of the industries that is actually kind of in the forefront of doing that the fastest. So that's really exciting, and something to be proud of. And as for how to break into the industry, that is not the easiest thing to do, but I would say, if you have a strong desire to be in this industry and a dream to be a perfumer, don't give up on that. And I would just try to work within a fragrance company, to get a feel for the landscape, in any position that you can, and try and get some exposure and make some contacts and meet people, because it's kind of the industry where you have to be inside, before you can get access to the opportunities. So, and to see if you're going to like it, because it's a very specific career. Um, I think the reality can be a little bit different than the imagined reality. So I think it's a great.
Oh, yes, it's very romantic and dreamy, I think, when people think about that kind of a career. Well, you are beautiful, and your whole life journey is beautiful, and I'm sure it's inspired. It certainly inspired me, and I know it's going to inspire the audience too, and our watchers, our other ladies. But so we're going to head off. I know you have some things, and we're heading out. But is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share, or were to tell us about you?
Um, no, I think we covered it. If anyone's interested in learning more about perfumery or natural ingredients, you can follow me on Instagram at Nascent Perfumer. And yeah, I look forward to sharing more with all of you.
Okay, so that's your Instagram, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Nascent Perfumer.
Yeah, so you have lots of wonderful followers. So I thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to start wearing some of your fragrances.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to be on.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.